In this video, I'll be talking about Jon Shafer's At the Gates, the most complex 4X I have ever seen, and definitely a title that can be a game changer in the 4X genre. Now, I'm not saying this is the most complex 4X ever made, I'm just saying that it might be, and that it's by far the most complex one that I have ever seen, heard of, or played. But if this is your first time on my channel, good morning, afternoon, evening, I'm Steven Nonsense, and gaming and geek culture is what I do. At the Gate starts you off in the year 400 AD, and it's supposed to take place all throughout the Dark Ages. Overall, its scope is arguably smaller than that of, say, the Civilization games. After all, there is very little nuclear war that happens in At the Gate. But it more than makes up for that with exquisitely detailed and varied logistics chains, as well as a whole bunch of people management. And keep in mind, this is after all an indie effort, not a Civilization level game, although Jon Shafer did design Civilization 5, he kinda made this one on his own. There's a couple of other things you need to know till we get into the meat and potatoes of the game. You have only one settlement, but you can move it around as well as decide to make it permanent. The maps are randomly generated every time you play, and initially you cannot play as other peoples other than the Goths. No, not those ones, the OG Goths. The only way of unlocking the plenty of other peoples in the game is to form an alliance with these other people during your actual games. So that's some incentive right there to not be a warmonger from the very beginning. Not that that would be simple or easy, not in this game. The art direction looks very appropriate for the period in which the game takes place. It gives the impression of drawings from manuscripts of the time, especially when the map isn't discovered. Obviously not stylized in ye olde way, but it does look fitting to the proceedings. There's a very Civilization 2-like vibe to the art overall, which I love. So, onto the actual gameplay now. Your civilization, culture, or society, because you're not a kingdom yet, you'll need to put in some work to reach that point, is based around clans. And much like the maps, the clans are also random. Not just random, you could argue they're roguelite. They have random attributes which influence the types of professions they are suitable for, as well as how they'll interact with the other clans, especially when they're on the same tile for a longer period of time. Crucially though, they can and will change their minds relating to what it is they want to do with their lives as time goes on. And you'd better try to satisfy their desires as much as possible, because otherwise they'll be really poor workers. Now, I mentioned something about professions. There are so many professions in the game, and you only start with a very basic handful. The other ones you have to research. Ideally, you take stock of your surroundings and research the things that will be most useful immediately. If, for instance, there are lots of unidentified plants around, you might do well to research quickly up to a farmer in order to benefit from the plant tiles more than you would with just the basic gatherers and harvesters. But gatherers and harvesters can actually identify the unknown plants and farmers can't. But I'll return to the choices and the interlocking synergism of the professions and game mechanics a bit later on. I'll put a pin in it. When in an active profession, your clans will act like units you can move around the map. When they're in a settled profession, they'll function as passive buffs that reside in your settlement. This is mostly where their interaction with other clans will come into play. Since I mentioned plants, let's talk a bit about resources. There are so many of them as well that you'll never really be capable of having a constant supply of everything you need. In fact, it is made clear that resources will get depleted and then disappear altogether from the map, at least for the beginning to mid-game stages. The tiles produce resources for a number of turns, not a particular quantity. This means that the same tile will produce a different number of resources depending on what profession is harvesting them. But that's where the settlement moving comes into play, especially at the beginning of the game when you'll be using your most basic of professions to gather resources, you'll be depleting the tiles around your initial settlement relatively quickly. Just like in any other 4X strategy game, you can get a bunch of resources you don't have by trading for them with a caravan that shows up every once in a while. At the Gates goes further than that and actually allows you to create the same resource from different raw materials. This is where the interlocking synergisms come into play. Let me give you some examples. Let's take cloth. You'll need cloth to heal your clans and increase your clan limit. You can get cloth either by sending a trapper on a tile containing a herd of animals, or via a weaver and flax or wool. Keep in mind that both Trapper and Weaver are more advanced professions. You can get blocks of stone either by cutting them out of stone with a block cutter or by making them out of coal with a brick maker. Both those latter professions rely on other lower professions to make sense. The stone first has to be obtained by either a digger or a miner, while the coal has to be either mined or made by a coal maker. This allows you to make the most out of anything and everything you have around you on the map. And for everything else, you can and should trade. In fact, trading is the best initial source for things like tools or weapons, because getting to the level of you making your own will require quite a bit of time. And the thing is, and the game mentions this, when a map is generated, at least some of the other civilizations around you are already more developed than you are. And there's bandit clans wandering the map and they already have weapons and you don't. The weather changes as the year progresses, and this affects both your chance to gather plants, because once the soil gets cold in the autumn, you won't be able to harvest or gather anything until the following spring, but it also affects your clan's ability to be outside the settlement. This generally means that when winter closes in, you might want to start calling your most distant clans back home for fear of losing them. Managing your clans is one of the main mechanics in the game. Balancing out their random attributes with your requirements for development can prove to be quite problematic, because in some situations you'll have to make very suboptimal choices in order to get anything done. And that's what I believe is the entire philosophy behind playing the game. It's tough, challenging, and will not allow you to do anything in an optimal manner. You just have to deal and make do with what you have on hand, and sometimes it will be easier than others. Kinda like in real life. I was actually talking to Jon Shafer on Twitter, and he said that even after 7 years of working on At the Gates, even he still finds new situations in the game, which is a testament to the roguelite nature of the thing. Now, there are some other details to take into consideration before deciding whether or not At the Gates is the game for you. It is a very slow starting game, very. Despite that, you will be extremely busy dealing with all the things I mentioned earlier, but compared to other 4Xs, you will be at a completely different stage of the playthrough after investing the same amount of time. It needs to be slow at the beginning because you need that time to balance your clan's random attributes with your needs and with what's actually available in your initial surroundings. There's obviously more that could be said about the game. The music is wonderful, the sound effects of the seasons changing, the actual in-game effects of winter creeping onto the map, but I'll let you discover all those on your own, and I'm damn sure there's a lot of it I haven't managed to actually see. There are some tantalizing features that seem to be purposefully underdeveloped for the time being, things like more nuanced diplomatic relations and belief systems. But I don't know for sure, those might make it in the final release form of the game. That being said, the game is an insanely solid 4X experience, and I only expect bigger and better things coming down the pipeline in the shape of patches, updates, and most likely expansions. But even as it stands, I am confident in saying that Jon Shafer has made a modern classic. Get it, you will not regret it. On a different note, I have slightly sped up the footage in this video. On the one hand, because the game is, as I've said, quite slow, and also because running it on my laptop, it didn't work quite optimally. If you notice some weird stuttering or just weird behavior in the footage, it's because of me running the game on a subpar system. If you want to watch some proper gameplay footage, check out the video about At the Gates made by my Game Tales co-host Unicom on the Gaming HD channel. I'll post a link in the card. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if At the Gates sounds like the type of game for you. Sure as hell is the type of game for me. Be kind, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.